What happens when an unknown painter exposes the darkest secret of London's most powerful duke in front of the entire city? Tonight, I'm bringing you the story of Elena Whitford, the woman who dared to paint the truth, lost everything, and brought an empire to its knees. This is a story of betrayal, forbidden art, and a portrait that should never have existed. If you're watching from London, Paris, New York, or anywhere around the world, drop your city in the comments below. Hit that like button and stay until the end because what happens next will leave you speechless. Let's begin. Elena Whitford learned early that invisibility could be a gift. At 23, she had mastered the art of moving through London's glittering society like a shadow, present but unnoticed, observing but never observed. It was a skill born of necessity. The daughter of a disgraced painter, she had no family name to protect her, no fortune to buy her respectability, and no patron to smooth her path into the ruthless world of fine art. What she had was a pair of sharp gray eyes that saw things other people missed, and a reckless streak that refused to let her stay quiet about it. On a cold April morning in 1826, Elena stood in the cramped back room of the Ashford Gallery, staring at the massive canvas propped against the brick wall. 6 feet tall, 4 feet wide, oil on linen. It had taken her 3 months to complete, working by candlelight in a rented studio so small she could barely step back far enough to see the whole composition. The painting showed a man, not just any man, Adrian Vale, the Duke of Ravencrest, one of the wealthiest, most powerful noblemen in England. And Elena had painted him without his permission, without his knowledge, and, most dangerously, without his lies. "You're mad," whispered Sophie Carr, Elena's only friend and fellow artist, as she circled the canvas with wide, horrified eyes. "Absolutely mad. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Elena didn't answer. She was too busy studying the portrait with the same cool intensity she'd used to create it. The Duke stood in three-quarter profile, his dark coat elegant but severe, his posture rigid with the weight of authority. His face was handsome in a sharp, aristocratic way, high cheekbones, a firm jaw, dark brows pulled slightly together. But it was the eyes that mattered. In every official portrait, the Duke of Ravencrest looked like what he was supposed to be: proud, commanding, untouchable. A man born to rule. Elena had painted something else entirely. She had painted grief. It was there in the faint tension around his mouth, the shadow beneath his eyes, the way his fingers rested against the edge of a wooden frame. Not possessive, but hesitant, almost tender, as if he were touching something fragile, something lost. And in the background, barely visible in the soft gloom of the gallery behind him, Elena had included a detail that no one else would recognize. A landscape painting. Flemish, 17th century, the one that hung in the Duke's private collection at Ravencrest House. Except Elena had altered it. She'd painted it the way it was supposed to look, before someone had changed it. "Sophie?" Elena said quietly, still staring at the canvas. "Do you see it?" Sophie leaned closer, squinting. "See what?" "The landscape. In the background." "I see a blurry painting. What about it?" Elena's jaw tightened. "There's supposed to be a figure in that landscape, a man standing near the bridge. But when I saw the painting 2 months ago at Ravencrest House, the figure was gone." Sophie blinked. "Gone?" "Painted over. Removed." Elena's voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. "Someone altered the original artwork, and I think it was deliberate." Sophie stared at her. "Elena, please tell me you didn't." "I painted it the way it's supposed to be, the way it was before someone tried to erase it." "Why would you do that?" Elena turned to face her friend, and for the first time that morning, her expression cracked. The careful composure slipped, revealing something raw beneath. "Because my father spent his whole life being called a fraud," she said quietly. "Because he died in disgrace, accused of forging paintings he never touched. Because the people who destroyed him are still out there, still powerful, still protected." She looked back at the portrait. "And because when I stood in that gallery and saw that landscape, saw what had been taken from it, I knew. I knew it wasn't the first time. I knew there was a pattern, a network." Sophie's face went pale. "You think the Duke of Ravencrest is involved in art forgery?" I don't know, Elena admitted, but I know something is wrong, and I know that if I stay silent, no one will ever ask the questions that matter. So you painted him like this. Sophie gestured helplessly at the canvas. You made him look human, vulnerable. You showed the world that the great Duke of Ravencrest is grieving something he won't admit. Yes, and you included evidence of a possible crime in his own collection. Yes. Sophie exhaled slowly. They're going to destroy you. Elena's smile was bitter. They already did. When they destroyed my father, I have nothing left to lose. Except your life. Then I'll lose it painting the truth. For a long moment, the two women stood in silence, staring at the portrait of a man who had no idea he was about to become the center of the biggest scandal London had seen in years. Outside, the gallery was beginning to fill with voices. The exhibition was set to open in less than an hour. The city's elite would arrive in silk and scandalized whispers, eager to see what the season's crop of young artists had produced. And Elena Whitford, unknown, penniless, the daughter of a disgraced forger, was about to show them something they would never forget. Sophie touched her arm gently. It's not too late. We can pull the painting. Hang something else. One of your society portraits. Safe. Forgettable. Elena shook her head. I didn't come here to be safe. Then what did you come here for? Elena looked at the portrait one last time, at the grief she'd captured, at the truth she'd painted into the background. To make them look, she said softly, to make them see. The Ashford Gallery was one of the most prestigious exhibition spaces in London, a grand hall with soaring ceilings, polished marble floors, and walls lined in deep crimson velvet. It was the kind of place where reputations were made and destroyed in the span of a single evening. By the time the doors opened at 7 o'clock, the gallery was packed. Elena stood in the corner near the back wall, partially hidden behind a marble column, watching as the crowd surged through the entrance. They came in waves. Lords and ladies, art critics, wealthy collectors, ambitious painters hoping to catch the eye of a patron. The air buzzed with conversation, laughter, the clink of champagne glasses. No one looked at her. She was wearing her best dress, a simple gown of dark blue wool that she'd tailored herself. No jewels, no gloves, no maid trailing behind her. She looked exactly like what she was, a working artist with no claim to nobility. Invisible. Perfect. She watched as the crowd began to move through the exhibition, pausing in front of paintings, murmuring critiques, offering polite applause. Most of the work on display was exactly what London expected. Tasteful portraits of distinguished gentlemen, soft landscapes, a few biblical scenes rendered in the approved classical style. Safe. Forgettable. And then someone found her painting. Elena heard it before she saw it, a sudden hush spreading through the crowd like a ripple across still water. Conversations faltered, heads turned. People began moving toward the far wall, drawn by curiosity and the unmistakable scent of scandal. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She stepped out from behind the column and made her way carefully through the crowd, slipping between clusters of onlookers until she had a clear view. Her portrait hung in the center of the back wall, impossible to miss, and the crowd was staring. Is that? Someone whispered. It can't be. It is. That's the Duke of Ravencrest. Who painted this? A man in a velvet coat pushed forward, leaning close to read the small brass plaque beneath the frame. His eyebrows shot up. Elena Whitford, he read aloud. Never heard of her. Nor have I, said a woman beside him, her tone dripping with disdain. No family, no patron, probably desperate for attention. Well, she's certainly achieved that. More people gathered, the whispers grew louder. Look at his face. She made him look sad. Not sad. Haunted. It's intimate, too intimate, as if she knows him. Does she? She must. No one paints a man like that without... The speaker trailed off, her implication hanging in the air like smoke. Elena felt her stomach twist. She'd known this would happen, knew that the moment she unveiled a portrait of a powerful duke, the world would assume only one thing, that she was his mistress. It didn't matter that she'd never spoken to Adrian Vale. It didn't matter that she'd painted him from memory, from careful observation during a public gallery tour at Ravencrest House. All that mattered was the intimacy of the painting. And intimacy, in London's eyes, could only mean one thing. Disgraceful, muttered an elderly woman in diamonds. A nobody painting a duke without permission. She should be arrested for slander. It's not slander if it's true, countered a younger man. Look at the technique, the detail. She's bloody good. Good or not, this is scandalous. The duke will have her head. If he doesn't sue her first. Elena forced herself to breathe slowly. She'd expected outrage, expected judgment. What she hadn't expected was the silence, not the murmurs of the crowd. Those continued, relentless, but the silence at the center of the painting itself. The way people stopped talking when they looked too long at the duke's face, the way their expressions shifted from shock to something quieter. Confusion, recognition. Because the truth, Elena had learned, was a strange thing. It could scandalize you, and it could also make you pause. One of the gallery critics, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Donovan, stepped forward, studying the portrait with professional detachment. He tilted his head, adjusted his spectacles, leaned closer to examine the brushwork. Extraordinary, he murmured. The crowd quieted slightly. Donovan gestured toward the painting. Look at the composition, the use of light and shadow, the emotional restraint in the posture combined with the vulnerability in the eyes. This isn't flattery. This is portraiture as revelation. Revelation? Someone scoffed. It's character assassination. No, Donovan said firmly. It's honesty, and that's far more dangerous. He turned, scanning the crowd. Who is Elena Whitford? Elena's throat went dry. Before she could decide whether to step forward or run, a new commotion erupted near the gallery entrance. The crowd parted, and Elena's heart stopped, because walking through the center of the room, flanked by 2 footmen in immaculate livery, was the man she'd painted. Adrian Vale, the Duke of Ravencrest. He was taller than she remembered, broader in the shoulders. His dark coat was perfectly tailored, his cravat white as snow, his expression utterly unreadable. The crowd fell silent. Every eye in the room turned toward him, then toward the painting, then back again. The Duke stopped 3 paces from the portrait. He stared. Elena couldn't breathe. She waited for the explosion, the fury, the cold aristocratic rage that would have her dragged from the gallery and thrown into the street. But Adrian Vale didn't move. He simply stood there, staring at his own face, at the grief she'd captured, at the truth she'd dared to paint. And then, very slowly, his gaze shifted to the background of the portrait, to the Flemish landscape, to the figure that shouldn't be there. His expression changed. Not anger, something else. Shock. The Duke's jaw tightened. His hands, which had been loose at his sides, curled into fist. He turned, his dark eyes sweeping the crowd. Who? He said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Painted this? No one answered. Elena felt Sophie's hand close around her wrist, tight with warning. Don't speak, don't move. But Elena had come here to be seen. She stepped forward. I did. The crowd turned as one, 100 pairs of eyes locking onto her. Elena stood perfectly still, her chin lifted, her hands steady at her sides. She'd spent her entire life being invisible. She wasn't going to flinch now. The Duke's gaze found her. For a long, excruciating moment, he said nothing. He simply looked at her, taking in her plain dress, her lack of jewelry, the paint-stained fingers she hadn't quite managed to scrub clean. She was nothing, and they both knew it. You are Elena Whitford, he said. Not a question. Yes, Your Grace. You painted my portrait without my knowledge. Yes. Without my permission. Yes. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone gasped. The Duke took a step closer. Elena forced herself not to retreat. Why? He asked. The question caught her off guard. She'd expected accusations, threats, outrage, not curiosity. She glanced past him at the portrait, at the grief she'd seen in his eyes during that gallery tour 2 months ago, when he'd stood alone in front of the Flemish landscape, staring at something no one else could see. Because, she said quietly, you looked like a man carrying a question you couldn't ask. The Duke's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. And what question is that? Elena hesitated. This was the moment, the edge of the cliff. She could step back, apologize, claim ignorance, or she could jump. The question, she said slowly, of what happened to the figure in the landscape behind you. The Duke went very still. The crowd leaned forward, straining to hear. Elena continued, her voice steady. The painting in your private gallery, the Flemish landscape attributed to Ruysdael. There's supposed to be a man standing near the bridge, but when I saw it 2 months ago, the figure was gone. She met his eyes. Someone altered it, Your Grace. Someone removed part of the original composition, and I think you've been wondering why. The silence that followed was absolute. The Duke stared at her, his face a mask of cold control. But Elena had spent 3 months studying that face, painting every shadow, every tension. She could see the cracks in the mask. He knew. He'd known something was wrong, and she'd just confirmed it in front of half of London. You overstep, Miss Whitford, he said, his voice dangerously soft. Yes, Your Grace. You make accusations you cannot prove. I make observations. Whether they're accusations depends on what's true. Another murmur from the crowd. Bolder now, excited. The Duke's jaw tightened. You know nothing about that painting. I know it's been altered. I know the alteration was deliberate. And I know... She paused, choosing her words carefully. I know that the man in the original composition looked like someone you loved. The Duke's mask cracked, just for a second. Just long enough for Elena to see the raw pain beneath. Then it was gone, buried under aristocratic ice. You, he said quietly, are either extraordinarily perceptive or extraordinarily reckless. Both, Your Grace. And you thought exposing this, whatever this is, in a public gallery was appropriate? Elena's hands tightened at her sides. I thought silence was no longer acceptable. Why? Because my father died in disgrace, accused of forging paintings he never touched. Because the network that destroyed him is still operating, and because if no one asks the hard questions, the lies will stand forever. The Duke's eyes narrowed. Your father was the forger, William Whitford. It wasn't a question. Elena's throat constricted. My father was the painter William Whitford. He was accused of forgery and ruined by people more powerful than him. He died before he could clear his name. And you think avenging him by slandering me will bring you justice? I'm not slandering you, Elena said, her voice rising slightly. I'm asking you to look at your own collection and see what I saw. Something is wrong, Your Grace. Someone has been stealing from you, and I think it's connected to the network that destroyed my father. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. The Duke studied her for a long moment. Then, to her astonishment, he turned back to the portrait. He stood in front of it, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. The grief, he said quietly, almost to himself. You painted me grieving. Yes. Why? Because that's what I saw. He turned to look at her, and for the first time his mask slipped completely. No one else saw that. Elena held his gaze. No one else was looking. The Duke was silent for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked the entire room. He smiled. It was faint, barely there, but unmistakable. Miss Whitford, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent gallery. You are either a fool or a genius. I haven't decided which. Elena's pulse hammered. I'm simply a painter, Your Grace. No, he said. You're a woman who sees too much. He turned to address the crowd, his voice cool and commanding. This portrait will not be sold. I'm purchasing it. Immediately. Collective gasp. The gallery owner, a portly man named Mr. Ashford, hurried forward, wringing his hands. Your Grace, the price hasn't been set. Name it. That is £500, the Duke said flatly. The crowd erupted. Elena felt the floor tilt beneath her. £500, a fortune, more than she'd earn in 5 years. Mr. Ashford stammered. Your Grace is most generous. It's not generosity, it's necessity. The Duke's gaze returned to Elena. Miss Whitford, I require a private conversation. Now. It wasn't a request. Elena glanced at Sophie, who looked ready to faint. Then she nodded. As you wish, Your Grace. The Duke gestured toward a side door that led to the gallery's private offices. After you. Elena walked toward the door, acutely aware of every eye in the room watching her. The whispers followed her like a shadow. She's done it now. He'll ruin her. Or marry her. Don't be absurd. The door closed behind them, cutting off the noise. The private office was small and dimly lit, lined with ledgers and forgotten paintings. The Duke stood near the window, his back to her, staring out at the gaslit street below. For a long moment, he said nothing. Elena waited, her heart pounding. Finally, he spoke. The man in the landscape, he said quietly. The one you painted. The one who's supposed to be there. Yes? It was my father. Elena's breath caught. The Duke turned to face her, and for the first time she saw him without the mask, without the title. Just a man standing in a shadowed room, carrying a grief so heavy it had nearly broken him. He died 2 years ago, the Duke continued, and 3 months after his death, I began to suspect that something was wrong with the collection. Small things at first. An inventory discrepancy. A painting that didn't quite match the records. And then I saw the landscape. He paused, his jaw tight. I stood in front of it for an hour, trying to remember, and I knew something was missing, but I couldn't prove it. I had no original to compare it to, no documentation, just a feeling. Elena stepped closer. So you stayed silent? Yes. Why? The Duke's laugh was bitter. Because I am the Duke of Ravencrest. Because my family has enemies who would relish any scandal. Because if I admitted that our collection had been compromised, if I acknowledged that someone had been stealing from us, forging replacements, it would destroy everything my father built. So you buried it. I protected my family by letting the thieves continue. The Duke's eyes flashed. You think I don't know that? You think I haven't spent every day since wondering if I made the right choice? You think I... He stopped, his fists clenched. Elena spoke softly. I think you've been carrying this alone for too long. The Duke stared at her. Then slowly the tension left his shoulders. You're right, he said quietly. About all of it. The landscape, the alteration, the network. He exhaled slowly. And I think you're right about your father, too. Elena's throat tightened. What do you mean? I remember the Whitford scandal. It was 8 years ago. Your father was accused of forging a Rembrandt study that belonged to Lord Pemberton. He didn't do it. I know. The Duke's voice was grim. Because I've since learned that Lord Pemberton's collection was systematically looted by the same network that targeted mine. The forgery your father was blamed for? It was planted evidence. A scapegoat. Elena felt the world tilt. You knew, she whispered. You knew he was innocent. I suspected. I couldn't prove it. And by the time I had enough information to be certain, he met her eyes. Your father was already dead. Elena's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. Why are you telling me this? The Duke stepped closer, his expression grave. Because you were right to paint that portrait. You were right to expose the truth, even when it was reckless, even when it could have destroyed you. He paused. And because I need your help. Elena stared at him. My help? Yes. You have your father's eye for forgery. You see things other people miss. And He hesitated. I need someone I can trust. Someone who isn't part of the network. Someone who has nothing to lose by telling the truth. I have everything to lose, Elena said quietly. Then you understand the stakes. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Two people bound by grief and secrets and a shared hunger for justice. Finally, Elena spoke. What do you want me to do? The Duke's smile was faint and dangerous. I want you to help me find every forgery in my collection. I want you to trace the network back to its source and I want you to help me destroy the people who killed your father's reputation and stole from mine." He extended his hand. "Will you?" Elena looked at his outstretched hand, at the man who'd bought her scandalous portrait for a fortune, at the Duke who'd just offered her a chance at revenge and redemption in one impossible bargain. She thought of her father, of the years he'd spent broken and disgraced, of the truth that had died with him. And she thought of the portrait hanging in the gallery outside, the portrait that had exposed a secret no one else had seen. She reached out and shook his hand. "Yes," she said, "I will." 3 days later, Elena stood in the private gallery at Ravencrest House, staring at the most beautiful lie she'd ever seen. The Flemish landscape hung on the far wall, lit by soft afternoon sun streaming through tall windows. At first glance, it was exquisite. Rolling hills, a stone bridge, a cluster of trees rendered in perfect detail. The kind of painting that belonged in a Duke's collection. But Elena didn't see beauty. She saw absence. "There," she said, pointing to the space near the bridge. "That's where he was. Your father." The Duke stood beside her, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression carved from stone. "How can you tell?" "The light," Elena said. "See how the shadows fall on the bridge? They suggest a vertical object blocking the sun, but there's nothing there, just empty space." She stepped closer. "And the composition is wrong, unbalanced. A painter like Ruysdael would never leave that gap. He was deliberate, precise." She traced the air with her finger, outlining the missing shape. "Your father stood right there, probably in the same pose as the portrait I saw in the East Wing, hands clasped, looking toward the horizon. It would have balanced the composition perfectly." The Duke was silent for a moment. Then he said quietly, "I remember that portrait. It hung in my father's study. He loved it." "Where is it now?" "Gone. Sold after his death to settle estate debts." His jaw tightened. "Or so I was told." Elena turned to look at him. "You don't believe it was sold?" "I believe nothing anymore, Miss Whitford. That's why you're here." He gestured toward the rest of the gallery, a long, elegant room lined with dozens of paintings. Landscapes, portraits, still lifes. A fortune in art. "I need you to examine every piece in this collection," he said. "Every painting, every sculpture, every artifact. If there are more forgeries, I need to know." Elena felt a thrill of fear and excitement. "That could take months." "Then you'll stay here, as my guest. I'll provide rooms, materials, access to the archives." He paused. "And discretion. No one outside this house can know what you're doing." "Why the secrecy?" The Duke's expression darkened. "Because if the network realizes I'm investigating, they'll destroy the evidence. Or worse, they'll come after the people I care about." He met her eyes. "Including you." Elena swallowed. "You think I'm in danger?" "I think you painted a portrait that revealed a secret worth killing for. I think you're the daughter of a man they already destroyed. And I think the moment you walked into this house, you became a target." "Then why ask me to help?" The Duke's smile was grim. "Because you're already a target, Miss Whitford. The only question is whether you'll face it alone or with an ally." Elena looked at the landscape, at the space where a man should have been. She thought of her father, dying alone, disgraced, broken by lies he couldn't fight. She thought of the portrait she'd painted, the truth she'd forced into the light. And she thought of the Duke standing beside her, offering her a chance she'd never expected. Not just revenge, justice. "All right," she said, "I'll do it, but I have conditions." The Duke raised an eyebrow. "You're negotiating with a Duke?" "I'm negotiating with a man who needs me." His smile widened slightly. "Fair enough. Name your terms." "First, I work independently. No interference. If I find something, I report it to you and only you." "Agreed." "Second, if we uncover the network, I want my father's name cleared, publicly, officially." The Duke nodded. "You have my word." "Third?" Elena hesitated. "If this gets dangerous, if it threatens your family or your reputation, you let me take the fall. I won't let you be destroyed for my father's vindication." The Duke stared at her, Then he stepped closer, his voice low and fierce. Miss Whitford, if this gets dangerous, we face it together. I don't sacrifice allies, and I don't abandon people who tell the truth. His eyes held hers. Do you understand? Elena's throat tightened. She nodded. Good, the Duke said. He turned toward the gallery doors. Then let's begin. Elena spent the next 2 weeks buried in the Ravencrest archives. The collection was vast, over 300 paintings, not counting sculptures, tapestries, and decorative arts. The records were meticulous, organized by the Duke's late father into careful ledgers that tracked every acquisition, every sale, every appraisal. But as Elena dug deeper, she began to see the cracks. Small discrepancies at first. A painting described as early Flemish that showed techniques from a century later. An inventory number that didn't match the catalog. A portrait whose provenance traced back to a dealer who died 30 years before the work was supposedly acquired. Mistakes or lies. Elena worked alone, taking detailed notes, comparing brushwork, analyzing pigments under a magnifying glass. She'd requested materials from the Duke, solvents, reagents, reference texts on historical painting techniques. He'd provided everything without question. And he visited, not every day, but often enough. He would appear in his gallery doorway, silent and watchful, and ask what she'd found. Elena would show him, a questionable signature here, a suspicious repair there. They spoke little, but the silence between them felt less like awkwardness and more like understanding. Two people hunting the same ghost. On the 15th day, Elena found it. She was examining a small portrait in the South Gallery, a supposed Holbein study of an unknown nobleman. Beautiful work, elegant, perfectly executed, and completely wrong. The pigments were too bright, the varnish too fresh. And when she examined the signature under magnification, she saw the telltale hesitation of a copyist, a slight tremor in the brushstroke that a master would never make. It was a forgery, a good one. Good enough to fool most collectors, but not good enough to fool her. Elena's hands shook as she set down the magnifying glass. She'd found it. Proof. She ran to find the Duke. He was in his study, reviewing correspondence, when she burst through the door without knocking. Your Grace, he looked up sharply. Miss Whitford, what's wrong? The Holbein, the portrait in the South Gallery. She was breathless, her words tumbling over each other. It's a forgery. The Duke went very still. Are you certain? Yes, the pigments, the technique, the signature, all wrong. It's a copy. A good one, but a copy. The Duke rose from his desk, his expression unreadable. Show me. They returned to the South Gallery together. Elena pointed out every flaw, every inconsistency, her voice steady now, clinical. The Duke listened in silence, his face a mask of controlled fury. When she finished, he spoke quietly. When was this painting acquired? Elena checked the ledger. 3 years ago, from a dealer named Armitage. The Duke's jaw tightened. Thomas Armitage. You know him? He handled several acquisitions for my father in the years before his death. The Duke's voice was cold. Including the Flemish landscape. Elena's pulse quickened. Do you think, I think, the Duke interrupted, that we've just found our first thread? He turned to face her, and in his eyes, Elena saw something dangerous. Determination. Miss Whitford. Tomorrow, we visit Mr. Armitage. The morning air bit cold as Elena climbed into the Duke's carriage, her hands trembling despite the fur-lined gloves he'd insisted she wear. She'd never ridden in a carriage this fine. Black lacquer gleaming, brass fittings polished to mirrors, the Ravencrest crest emblazoned on the door in gold leaf. It screamed wealth, power, the kind of authority that could crush a nobody like her without a second thought. The Duke settled across from her, his expression carved from ice. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, Elena admitted. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He tapped the roof and the carriage lurched forward. Thomas Armitage is dangerous, Miss Whitford. He's been dealing art in London for 30 years. He has clients in every great house, connections in every gallery, and enough money to buy silence when he needs it. Elena's throat tightened. And you think he's part of the forgery network? I think he's the architect. The Duke's voice was flat. My father trusted him. Bought 17 paintings through him in the last 5 years of his life. If those paintings are forgeries, then Armitage didn't just steal from us. He built his entire fortune on lies. What if he denies it? He will. Then how do we prove anything? The Duke's smile was cold. We don't prove it. We make him believe we already have proof, and then we watch him panic. Elena stared at him. That's your plan? Bluff? No, Miss Whitford. That's my opening move. The rest depends on how clever he thinks he is. The Duke leaned forward slightly. And how reckless you're willing to be. What does that mean? It means when we walk into his gallery, you're not a painter investigating forgeries. You're my personal art consultant. Wealthy, connected. Someone he'll want to impress. His eyes held hers. Can you play that role? Elena thought of the years she'd spent invisible, moving through London's elite like a ghost. She'd watched them, studied them, learned their language, their gestures, the subtle cruelty of their politeness. She could mimic them, but becoming one of them, even as a lie, felt like swallowing poison. Yes, she said quietly. I can do it. Good. The Duke settled back. Then remember, you are not Elena Whitford, daughter of a disgraced forger. You are Miss Whitford, advisor to the Duke of Ravencrest. You are untouchable, and you are absolutely certain of everything you say. Elena nodded, her pulse hammering. The carriage rolled through the streets of Mayfair, past elegant townhouses and manicured parks, until it stopped in front of a narrow building with a discreet brass plaque, Armitage and Sons, Fine Art Dealers. The Duke stepped out first, then offered his hand. Elena took it, letting him help her down. Together, they walked through the door. The gallery was smaller than Elena expected, just 2 rooms lined with paintings and sculptures, everything tasteful, everything expensive. A clerk looked up from a desk near the window, his eyes widening when he saw the Duke. Your Grace, what an honor. Mr. Armitage will be— Fetch him, the Duke said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The clerk stumbled to his feet and disappeared through a back door. Elena forced herself to breathe slowly, her hands clasped in front of her, her posture perfect. She'd worn her best dress again, the dark blue wool, but the Duke had sent a jeweler that morning with a loan, a necklace of sapphires that glittered cold against her throat. Armor. The door opened and Thomas Armitage emerged. He was older than Elena expected, perhaps 60, with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His suit was impeccable, his smile warm and practiced. He looked like what he was, a man who'd spent decades convincing wealthy people to trust him. Your Grace, Armitage said, bowing slightly. This is an unexpected pleasure. How may I assist you? The Duke didn't smile. I'm here regarding several acquisitions you facilitated for my late father. Armitage's expression didn't change, but Elena saw the flicker in his eyes. Wariness. Of course, Armitage said smoothly. I had the great honor of advising the late Duke on many pieces. Beautiful works, all of them. Is there a problem? That depends, the Duke said. Miss Whitford? Elena stepped forward, channeling every aristocratic woman she'd ever watched. Her voice came out cool, precise, utterly confident. We've been conducting a comprehensive review of the Ravencrest collection, she said. Standard practice for estate management. And we've identified several inconsistencies. Armitage's smile tightened. Inconsistencies? Discrepancies between the documented provenance and the actual characteristics of certain works. Elena met his eyes. For example, the Holbein portrait acquired 3 years ago. The pigments don't match the period. The varnish is contemporary, and the signature shows evidence of imitation rather than original execution. The room went very quiet. Armitage's smile vanished. Miss Whitford, he said slowly, I assure you, every painting I've sold to the Ravencrest family has been thoroughly authenticated. If there's been some mistake, there's been no mistake, Elena said. The painting is a forgery, a skilled one, but unmistakable to anyone who knows what to look for. Armitage's face flushed. That's a serious accusation. It's an observation. You're accusing me of selling fraudulent work. I'm stating a fact, Elena interrupted, her voice sharp as glass. Whether the forgery originated with you or with your suppliers is the question we're here to answer. The Duke spoke quietly. So which is it, Armitage? Are you incompetent or complicit? Armitage's jaw worked. Your Grace, I have served your family for decades. My father trusted you, the Duke said, his voice cold. He bought 17 paintings through you in the 5 years before his death. If those paintings are forgeries, then you either failed to authenticate them properly or you knowingly sold us fraudulent works. He paused. Either way, your reputation is finished. Armitage's hands clenched. You have no proof. We have the paintings, Elena said, and I have the technical knowledge to demonstrate exactly how and when they were forged. The courts will believe me, Mr. Armitage, especially when I testify that my late father, William Whitford, was destroyed by the same network that defrauded the Duke. Armitage went pale. Whitford, he whispered. You're William Whitford's daughter. Yes. Then you know... He stopped, his eyes darting between Elena and the Duke. You know what happened to him. Elena's voice was ice. I know he was framed. I know the forgery he was accused of creating was planted by someone else. And I know the network that destroyed him is still operating. She stepped closer. The question, Mr. Armitage, is whether you're going to help us dismantle that network, or whether you're going to hang with it. For a long moment, Armitage said nothing. Then he turned and walked to the door, locking it. When he faced them again, his expression was hollow. You don't understand what you're asking, he said quietly. Then explain it, the Duke said. Armitage exhaled slowly. 20 years ago, I was approached by a man named Victor Hale. He was a collector, wealthy, connected. He had access to works I could never acquire through legitimate channels. He paused. He also had a workshop, forgers. The best I'd ever seen. Elena's stomach twisted. Armitage continued, his voice flat. Hale proposed a partnership. He would provide me with forgeries, perfect copies of masterworks. I would sell them to collectors, authenticate them through my reputation, and we would split the profits. In exchange, he would occasionally need me to remove original works from certain collections. Steal them, the Duke said. Replace them, Armitage corrected. The owners would never know. They'd keep the forgery. We'd sell the original on the black market. Elena felt bile rise in her throat. And my father? Armitage's face crumpled. Your father was talented. Too talented. He noticed inconsistencies in a Rembrandt study that Hale had sold through another dealer. He started asking questions, digging into provenance records. He swallowed. Hale couldn't risk exposure, so he framed your father with a forgery, destroyed his reputation, and made sure no one would ever believe him again. Elena's hand shook. You knew. You knew he was innocent, and you let him die in disgrace. I had no choice. You had every choice. Elena's voice broke. You could have told the truth, and I would have been next, Armitage said desperately. Hale doesn't forgive loose ends, Miss Whitford. He doesn't leave witnesses. If I'd spoken up, I'd be dead. The Duke's voice cut through the room like a blade. Where is Hale now? Armitage hesitated. Where? The Duke repeated, his tone dangerous. I don't know, Armitage said. He operates through intermediaries. I haven't seen him in 5 years. After your father's death, he looked at the Duke. After the late Duke died, Hale went silent. No more jobs, no more contact. I thought the network had dissolved. But it hasn't, Elena said. No. Armitage's voice was barely a whisper. Last month, I received a letter. No signature. Just instructions to authenticate a new acquisition for Lord Pemberton. Another forgery. The network is still active, and it's expanding. The Duke's expression was carved from stone. Give me names. Everyone you know who's involved. Armitage shook his head. I can't. You will, the Duke said quietly. Or I will have you arrested this afternoon. And I will make certain that every forged painting you've ever sold is traced back to you. Your name will be synonymous with fraud. Your family will be ruined. Your legacy will be nothing but lies. He leaned forward. Or you can help us. Give us the names, the records, everything you know about Hale's network. And in exchange, I will ensure that when this is over, your involvement is kept quiet. You'll lose your business, but you'll keep your freedom." Armitage stared at him, trapped. Then he walked to a cabinet, pulled out a ledger, and set it on the desk. "These are my private records," he said quietly. "Every forgery I've handled. Every client. Every intermediary." He opened the book, his hands shaking. "And this?" He pointed to a name written in the margin. Marcus Vale. Elena's breath caught. The Duke went very still. "My cousin," he said softly. Armitage nodded. "He's been Hale's primary contact for the past 3 years. He handles the replacements, gets access to private collections through his family connections. He's the one who arranged the theft from your gallery." The Duke's face was a mask of controlled fury. Marcus Vale, his cousin, the man who'd visited Ravencrest House a dozen times in the past year, who'd dined at their table, who'd been trusted, who'd betrayed them. "Where is he now?" the Duke asked, his voice deadly calm. "I don't know, but he has a warehouse in Southwark. That's where the workshop is, where the forgers operate." Armitage hesitated. "If you want to find Hale, start there." They left the gallery in silence. Elena climbed into the carriage, her mind reeling. Marcus Vale, a member of the Duke's own family. The betrayal was so complete, so vicious, that she could barely process it. The Duke sat across from her, staring out the window, his expression unreadable. Finally, Elena spoke. "I'm sorry." He turned to look at her. "For what?" "Your cousin. Your family. I know." "You know nothing," the Duke said, his voice flat. "Marcus has always been weak, reckless, drowning in debts he can't pay. I should have seen this coming." "You couldn't have known." "I should have." His jaw tightened. "My father knew. He cut Marcus out of his will for a reason, and I ignored the warning because I wanted to believe family meant something." He looked away. "I was wrong." Elena's throat ached. She wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease the grief carved into his face. But there were no words for this kind of betrayal. Instead, she asked, "What do we do now?" The Duke's eyes hardened. "We go to Southwark, we find the workshop, and we destroy it." "And Marcus?" The Duke's smile was cold and brutal. "Marcus made his choice. Now he'll live with the consequences." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She paced her borrowed rooms at Ravencrest House, replaying the confrontation with Armitage, the revelation about Marcus, the ledger full of names and lies. Her father's name hadn't been in that book, because he'd never been part of the network. He'd been collateral damage, a warning, and now she was hunting the people who'd killed him. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like breathing. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Sophie standing in the hallway, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes wide with concern. "I had to see you," Sophie said. "The rumors are everywhere. People are saying you're living with the Duke, that you're his mistress, that the forgery investigation is a cover for—" "It's not," Elena said firmly. "Sophie, I'm working. That's all." Sophie stepped inside, closing the door. "Elena, do you have any idea how this looks? You're staying in his house, riding in his carriage, wearing his jewels. They're borrowed." "It doesn't matter," Sophie's voice cracked. "London doesn't care about the truth. They care about the scandal, and you're giving them one." Elena's hands clenched. "I don't care what London thinks." "You should, because if this goes wrong, if the Duke decides he's done with you, you'll have nothing. No reputation, no prospects, no way back. I never had those things to begin with." "You had me," Sophie said quietly. "You had a chance to rebuild quietly, to paint commissions, to survive. Now you're gambling everything on a man who could destroy you with a word." Elena met her friend's eyes. "He won't." "How do you know?" "Because he gave me his word. And because—" she hesitated. "Because we're the same, Sophie. We've both lost people we loved to lies we couldn't fight. And we're both willing to burn everything down to find the truth." Sophie stared at her. Then she pulled Elena into a fierce hug. "Promise me you'll be careful," she whispered. "I promise." But even as she said it, Elena knew it was a lie, because tomorrow they were going to Southwark, and nothing about that would be careful. The warehouse sat on the edge of the Thames, a crumbling brick structure that reeked of rot and river water. The Duke had brought 4 men with him, footmen he trusted absolutely, armed and silent. Elena wore a plain cloak, her hair hidden beneath a hood, her heart pounding as they approached the side entrance. The Duke tried the door, locked. One of the footmen produced a set of tools and worked the lock with practiced efficiency. 30 seconds later, the door swung open. They slipped inside. The warehouse was dark, lit only by thin shafts of moonlight filtering through gaps in the roof. The air smelled of linseed oil and turpentine, the scent of a painter's studio. Elena's pulse quickened. The Duke gestured for silence, and they moved deeper into the building, past stacks of crates and canvas rolls until they reached a large open space at the center. And there, arranged on easels like an exhibition, were the paintings. Dozens of them, forgeries in various stages of completion. A Vermeer, a Caravaggio, a Titian, all perfect, all fake. Elena felt sick. This wasn't just a workshop. It was a factory. The Duke moved among the paintings, his expression carved from fury. He stopped in front of one canvas, a portrait of a man in Renaissance dress. His father. The original painting. The one that had been stolen from Ravencrest House and replaced with a forgery. The Duke's hand shook as he reached out, almost touching the canvas, then pulling back. "Your Grace!" The voice came from the shadows. They whirled. Marcus Vale stepped into the light, flanked by 2 men with cudgels. He was younger than the Duke, perhaps 30, with the same dark hair and sharp features. But where the Duke's face was carved with discipline and control, Marcus looked hollowed out, eyes red-rimmed, jaw slack, the desperate look of a man who'd run out of options. "Adrian," Marcus said, his voice hoarse, "you shouldn't be here." The Duke's voice was ice. "Neither should you." Marcus laughed bitterly. "No, I should be rotting in debtor's prison, or dead in an alley. Those were my choices, cousin, until Hale gave me another option. Stealing from your own family. Surviving," Marcus spat. "You don't understand. You've never had to choose between honor and survival. You were born with everything. I was born with a name and nothing else." The Duke stepped forward. "So you betrayed us. You stole Father's portrait. You replaced it with a lie. You watched me grieve, and you said nothing." Marcus's face twisted. "I had no choice. Everyone has a choice. Not when the debts are enough to break you, not when the moneylenders are threatening your life." Marcus's voice cracked. "Hale offered me a way out. All I had to do was give him access to a few paintings, easy replacements. No one would ever know." "I knew," the Duke said quietly. "I've known for 2 years that something was wrong. And I stayed silent because I didn't want to believe it was you." Marcus's laugh was ugly. "Well, now you know. Congratulations, Adrian. You've caught the family disgrace." Elena stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "Where is Victor Hale?" Marcus's eyes shifted to her, and his expression changed. Recognition. "You're Whitford's daughter," he said slowly. "The painter who started all this. Answer the question." Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hale doesn't meet with people like you. He operates through layers, intermediaries. By the time you get close, he's already 3 steps ahead." "Then give us the intermediaries." "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't," the Duke said quietly, "I will have you arrested for theft, forgery, and conspiracy. You will stand trial. You will be convicted. And you will hang." The silence stretched. Then Marcus laughed, a broken, desperate sound. "You won't do it," he said. "You can't. The scandal would destroy the family. The Ravencrest name would be synonymous with fraud and betrayal. You'd lose everything Father built." The Duke's expression didn't change. "Try me." Marcus stared at him, and for the first time Elena saw the truth in his eyes. Fear. Because the Duke wasn't bluffing. "All right," Marcus said hoarsely. "All right? I'll give you a name. One name. The broker who connects Hale to his clients." "Who?" Marcus swallowed. "Your art advisor. The man who's been consulting on your collection for the past year." Elena's blood went cold. "Lord Pemberton's former curator," Marcus continued. "He's been inside every major collection in London. He knows what's valuable, what's vulnerable, and who won't notice when a painting is replaced. The Duke's jaw tightened. His name, James Rathbone. The name hit Elena like a fist. James Rathbone, her former mentor, the man who'd taught her to see forgeries, the man who'd comforted her after her father's death, the man who'd destroyed her father in the first place. She couldn't breathe. The Duke turned to look at her, concern flickering in his eyes. "Miss Whitford." "It's him," she whispered. "It's been him all along." And suddenly everything made sense. Rathbone had been her father's colleague. He'd worked with him, learned from him, studied his techniques, and when Hale needed a scapegoat, Rathbone had provided one. The talented painter who asked too many questions. Elena felt the world tilt. Her mentor. Her betrayer. The man who'd smiled at her father's funeral and told her that truth always surfaced. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice shaking. Marcus hesitated. "Tell me," Elena said, stepping forward, "or I swear I will make certain you rot in prison for the rest of your life." Marcus's resolve crumbled. "Pemberton's estate. There's an auction tomorrow night. Rathbone will be there, authenticating the lots." He swallowed. "And so will Hale." The Duke's eyes sharpened. "Hale will be there in person?" "It's the largest sale of the year. He never misses it." The Duke turned to his men. "Secure this warehouse, take Marcus into custody, and send word to the magistrate. We'll need a warrant." Marcus lunged forward. "Adrian, please." "You made your choice," the Duke said coldly. "Now, live with it." He took Elena's arm and guided her toward the door. Behind them, Marcus's protests faded into silence. Outside, the night air hit Elena like ice. She staggered, her legs shaking, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The Duke caught her before she fell. "Breathe," he said quietly. "Just breathe." Elena pressed her hands to her face, trying to steady herself. But all she could see was Rathbone's face, his kind smile, the way he'd told her that her father had been weak, that he'd brought his ruin upon himself, lies, all of it. "I'm going to kill him," she whispered. The Duke's hands tightened on her shoulders. "No, you're going to face him. You're going to look him in the eye and make him confess. And then you're going to watch him hang." Elena looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this?" she asked hoarsely. "Why are you helping me?" The Duke's expression softened. "Because you were right," he said quietly. "About the portrait. About the truth. About everything." He brushed a tear from her cheek, his touch gentle. "And because you're the bravest person I've ever met." Elena's breath caught. For a moment they stood there in the darkness, two people bound by grief and fury, and something neither of them had expected. Trust. Then the Duke stepped back, his expression hardening into resolve. "Tomorrow night, we end this. We expose Hale, we destroy the network, and we clear your father's name." Elena nodded, wiping her eyes. "And Rathbone?" The Duke's smile was cold. "Rathbone will answer for what he's done. I promise you that." Elena believed him because tomorrow night they were going to war. And this time the truth would not be buried. The invitation arrived at dawn, delivered by a boy who vanished before Elena could ask questions. Heavy cream paper, embossed seal, Lord Pemberton's crest stamped in gold. "You are cordially invited to attend the private evening auction at Pemberton Hall. Viewing begins at 7 o'clock. Sale commences at 9. Elena turned the card over in her hands, her fingers trembling. This was it. The Duke appeared in the doorway of the breakfast room, already dressed for the day in a charcoal coat and pristine cravat. His eyes went to the invitation. "It came?" he asked. "Yes." He crossed to her, taking the card. His jaw tightened as he read it. "Pemberton is hosting as planned, which means Rathbone doesn't know we're coming. And Hale? If Marcus was telling the truth, Hale will be there, hidden among the buyers, probably using a false identity." The Duke set down the invitation. "We'll have one chance, Miss Whitford. Once we expose them publicly, they'll either confess or run. Either way, the network ends tonight." Elena's throat felt tight. "And if they deny everything? If they claim we have no proof?" The Duke's smile was cold. "Then we make them prove us wrong, in front of every art collector in London." He placed a small velvet box on the table. Elena opened it. Inside was a ring, simple gold band, no gemstone. but engraved on the inside were words that made her breath catch. Veritas vincit, truth conquers. My father's motto, the Duke said quietly. He wore this ring every day. It was in the portrait, the stolen one. When I saw it again last night, I knew he would have wanted you to have it. I can't. You can. And you will. His eyes held hers. You're about to walk into a room full of people who destroyed your father. You're going to face the man who betrayed him, and you're going to stand there and demand justice. He paused. You deserve to carry something that reminds you why. Elena's vision blurred. She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Thank you, she whispered. The Duke nodded. Then his expression hardened into the mask she recognized. The Duke of Ravencrest, untouchable and absolute. Tonight, we finish this, whatever it takes. Pemberton Hall rose from the London fog like a cathedral of wealth, all white stone and soaring columns, windows blazing with candlelight. Carriages lined the circular drive, disgorging lords and ladies in silk and diamonds. The city's elite gathered to spend fortunes on beauty they barely understood. Elena climbed down from the Duke's carriage, her heart hammering. She wore a gown the Duke had commissioned, deep emerald silk that caught the light, sapphires at her throat, her hair swept up in an elegant twist. She looked like she belonged here. She felt like an imposter. The Duke offered his arm. Remember, he murmured, you are Miss Elena Whitford, my personal art consultant. You have authenticated collections across Europe. You are brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely certain. I'm terrified. Good. So am I. His hand tightened on hers. But we don't let them see it. They walked through the entrance together. The auction hall was magnificent. A ballroom converted for the evening, rows of gilt chairs facing a raised platform where the auctioneer would stand. Along the walls, paintings were displayed on easels, each with a brass number and printed description. Buyers circulated slowly, examining the lots, whispering to advisors. And somewhere in this room, hidden among them, was Victor Hale. Elena scanned the faces, searching for anyone who looked out of place. But everyone here wore the same expression of polite interest, the same air of casual wealth. Hale could be any of them. There, the Duke said quietly. Elena followed his gaze. James Rathbone stood near the front of the room, consulting with a thin man in spectacles. He looked exactly as Elena remembered, 50 years old, distinguished silver hair, warm smile. He wore his authority like a comfortable coat, moving among the collectors with easy confidence. The man who'd taught her everything. The man who'd destroyed her father. Elena's hands clenched. Not yet, the Duke murmured. We wait until the auction begins. Maximum audience, maximum pressure. They moved through the room, pausing to examine paintings, nodding politely at acquaintances. Elena forced herself to smile, to play the role. But every nerve in her body screamed to confront Rathbone, to demand answers, to make him pay. A hand touched her elbow. She turned. Sophie stood there, wrapped in a blue shawl, her face pale with worry. Elena, she whispered, what are you doing here? Sophie, you shouldn't be. I received an invitation, anonymous. It said you'd need a witness tonight. Sophie's eyes were wide. What's happening? Before Elena could answer, a bell chimed. The auctioneer stepped onto the platform. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The sale will commence shortly. The crowd moved toward the chairs. Elena found herself swept along, Sophie on one side, the Duke on the other. They sat near the middle, close enough to see, far enough to avoid immediate attention. Rathbone stood to the side of the platform, his expression serene. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Welcome to this evening's private sale. We have assembled an exceptional collection, 32 lots representing the finest in European art. Our first item is a Flemish landscape, circa 1640, attributed to Jacob van Ruysdael. The auction began. Lots were presented, examined, bid upon. Prices climbed into the thousands. The crowd murmured approval, raised paddles, competed with quiet ferocity. Elena barely heard any of it. She was watching Rathbone. He moved through his duties smoothly, authenticating pieces, answering questions, nodding at successful bids. The perfect professional, the trusted expert, the liar. Lot 15 came up, a portrait of a Renaissance nobleman. Elena's breath caught. She recognized it immediately. The brushwork, the composition, the faint crack in the varnish near the left corner. It was one of the forgeries from the Southwark warehouse, and Rathbone was authenticating it. This piece, the auctioneer said, has been verified by Mr. James Rathbone as an original work by Bronzino, circa 1545. Provenance documentation is available for review. Rathbone smiled and nodded. The bidding started at £500. Elena stood. The room went quiet. Every head turned toward her. The Duke's hand caught her wrist, not restraining, just steadying. She stepped into the aisle. "I object," she said clearly. The auctioneer blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "I object to this sale. That painting is a forgery." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs. A woman near the front clutched her pearls. Rathbone's face went white. The auctioneer stammered, "Miss, this is highly irregular." "So is selling fraudulent artwork," Elena said. She walked toward the platform, her voice carrying across the silent room. "That portrait is not a Bronzino. It's a modern forgery created within the last 6 months. The pigments are wrong, the aging is artificial, and the provenance is fabricated." Rathbone stepped forward, his expression carefully controlled. "Miss Whitford, I understand you're upset about your father's situation, but making wild accusations— I'm making factual observations, Mr. Rathbone. The same observations my father made before you destroyed him." The crowd leaned forward. Rathbone's smile tightened. "Your father was a troubled man who made serious mistakes." "My father was framed by the network you work for," Elena said, her voice shaking with fury. "He discovered forgeries in Lord Pemberton's collection 8 years ago. He started asking questions, and you, his trusted colleague, his friend, you planted evidence to silence him." The room exploded into chaos. "This is outrageous. She's mad. Someone remove her." The Duke stood, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Miss Whitford is my personal art consultant. She has authenticated the entire Ravencrest collection, and she has identified multiple forgeries sold through Mr. Rathbone's network." The crowd went silent. Lord Pemberton himself rose from the front row, his face purple with rage. "Your Grace, this is my home, my auction, and your collection has been systematically looted," the Duke said coldly. "Replaced with forgeries while the originals were sold on the black market. Miss Whitford can prove it." Pemberton's fury faltered. "Prove it? How?" Elena stepped onto the platform. She moved to the Bronzino portrait, her hand steady despite the hammering of her heart. "This painting claims to be 400 years old," she said. "But look here." She pointed to the corner. "The varnish has been artificially aged using heat and chemical treatment. You can see the uneven discoloration. A genuine period varnish would show consistent yellowing." She traced the edge of the frame. "And here, the stretcher is modern pine, not period oak. The canvas weave is contemporary, and the signature—" She leaned close. "The signature shows hesitation." The hand trembled. A master doesn't hesitate when signing his own work. The crowd pressed forward, straining to see. Rathbone's voice was tight. "These are subjective interpretations." "Then let's test it," Elena said. She turned to face him. "Let's remove a paint sample and analyze the pigments. If this is a genuine Bronzino, the materials will match period composition. If it's a forgery, we'll find modern compounds." Rathbone's face went gray. "Or," Elena continued softly, "you could simply confess?" The silence stretched. Then Rathbone laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think you're clever," he said. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you're dealing with." "Then explain it to us," the Duke said quietly. Rathbone's expression twisted. "Your father was a fool, Miss Whitford. He saw too much, understood too little. He thought art was about truth. But art is about money. Always has been. Always will be." He gestured at the room. "These people don't care about authenticity. They care about status, about owning beauty they can display. A perfect forgery serves that purpose just as well as an original." "Until they discover the truth," Elena said. "They won't." Because people like me control the truth. We authenticate. We verify. We decide what's real and what's not. Rathbone's smile was ugly. Your father threatened that system, so we eliminated him. The crowd stirred, uncomfortable now. Elena stepped closer. Who is we, Mr. Rathbone? You already know. Say the name. Rathbone's eyes glittered. Victor Hale. A figure stood in the back of the room, tall, elegant, gray hair swept back from a sharp, intelligent face. He wore an expensive coat, carried a gold-topped cane, and looked like every other wealthy collector in the room, except his eyes. His eyes were cold as winter. Well done, Miss Whitford, Victor Hale said, his voice smooth as silk. You've managed to disrupt a perfectly good auction and ruin several reputations in one evening. Impressive. He walked forward, the crowd parting before him. The Duke's hand went to his coat, where Elena knew he carried a pistol. Hale noticed and smiled. I wouldn't, Your Grace, not in a room full of witnesses. Besides, I'm unarmed and utterly respectable. Just another collector, enjoying an evening of art. He stopped 3 paces from the platform. The problem, Miss Whitford, is that you have accusations but no proof. You claim forgeries, but all you've shown is speculation. The word of one painter against established experts. He gestured at Rathbone. Who will they believe? Elena's jaw tightened. I have proof. The warehouse in Southwark. The ledgers. Marcus Vale's testimony. Hale's expression didn't change. The warehouse that burned down 3 hours ago? The ledgers that were destroyed in the fire? The testimony of a desperate man drowning in debt who would say anything to save himself? Elena's blood went cold. You burned it. I protected my interests, Hale said calmly, just as I always have. And now you have nothing but theories and wild accusations. No evidence, no credibility. He paused, just like your father. Elena lunged. The Duke caught her, holding her back as she fought against him, fury and grief pouring through her in waves. Hale watched with mild interest. You see? He said to the crowd. Unstable. Emotional. Hardly the reliable expert the Duke claims. He turned to leave, and Sophie stepped into his path. She held something in her hands, a leather portfolio. You're right, Sophie said quietly. She doesn't have the ledgers from the warehouse. She opened the portfolio. But I have these. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Pictures of the warehouse, the paintings, the forgeries in progress. Each image carefully labeled, dated, annotated. Sophie looked at Elena. You asked me to document everything, remember? 2 weeks ago, when you first suspected the warehouse existed. I hired a photographer. We spent 3 nights getting evidence. She turned to Hale. Every painting, every tool, every piece of correspondence, all documented, all dated, all admissible in court. Hale's mask cracked. His hand moved toward his cane, and the Duke drew his pistol. Don't, the Duke said quietly. The room froze. Hale's hand stopped. His eyes flicked between the gun, the photographs, and the crowd of witnesses surrounding him. He was trapped, and he knew it. You've made a mistake, Hale said softly. All of you. This network is larger than you imagine, more powerful. You think exposing me will change anything? There are others. Buyers, collectors, people who profit from beautiful lies. He smiled. You can't stop it. You can only become part of it. Watch us, Elena said. She turned to the crowd, the lords and ladies, the collectors, the people who'd spent fortunes on art they barely understood. Everything you've bought tonight is suspect, she said clearly. Every authentication Mr. Rathbone has provided, every provenance he's verified, all of it needs to be re-examined because the network has been operating for 20 years and none of you are safe. The room erupted. Accusations flew. Collectors turned on each other. Pemberton was shouting at Rathbone. The auctioneer had abandoned his podium, and in the chaos, Hale moved. He grabbed Sophie, yanking her against him, his cane raised like a weapon. Everyone stop, he said quietly. The room went silent. The Duke's pistol tracked him, but the angle was wrong. Sophie was in the way. Hale backed toward the door, dragging Sophie with him. If anyone follows me, she dies. If anyone calls the authorities before I'm clear of London, she dies. Do you understand? Elena's heart stopped. Let her go. No, Hale said. She's my insurance, and you… He looked at Elena. You're going to live with the knowledge that your crusade for truth cost your friend her life. He reached the door, and Elena made a choice. She picked up the Bronzino forgery and hurled it at Hale's head. The canvas struck him across the face. He staggered, his grip on Sophie loosening. Sophie drove her elbow into his ribs and twisted free. The Duke fired. The shot echoed like thunder. Hale's cane shattered. He stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet, crashing to the floor, and then the Duke was on him, the pistol pressed to his throat. Move, the Duke said quietly, and I will kill you. Hale stared up at him, rage and disbelief warring in his eyes. You won't, he gasped. You're a Duke. You have rules. I have justice, the Duke said, and you're going to face it. The authorities arrived within the hour. Magistrates, constables, officials from the Crown's office, summoned by the Duke's authority and the sheer scale of the scandal. They arrested Hale and Rathbone on the spot, dragging them from Pemberton Hall while the crowd watched in stunned silence. Sophie stood with Elena, shaking but whole. You threw a painting at his head, Sophie whispered. Elena laughed, a broken, slightly hysterical sound. It was a forgery. It didn't matter. You could have been killed. So could you. Sophie pulled her into a fierce hug. We're insane, both of us. Yes, Elena agreed. Completely. The Duke appeared beside them, his expression grim. The magistrate wants statements from both of you, and they'll need the photographs as evidence. Sophie nodded. I have copies. They can have whatever they need. The Duke's eyes softened slightly. You saved us tonight, Miss Carr. All of us. Sophie flushed. I just documented what Elena discovered. You had the courage to use it when it mattered. That's not nothing. He turned to Elena. Walk with me? They stepped outside into the cool night air. The fog had lifted, leaving the sky clear and star-scattered. London spread below them, quiet for once. The Duke was silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, I need to tell you something. Elena's stomach tightened. What? Marcus. The Duke's voice was flat. When my men went to secure him at the warehouse, they found him dead, hanging from a rafter. Elena's breath caught. He killed himself. The authorities are calling it suicide. Guilt, shame, fear of prosecution. The Duke's jaw tightened. But the rope was wrong. The knot was wrong. And Marcus was left-handed. The bruising suggests someone else tied it. Hale had him killed. To silence him. To eliminate a witness. The Duke looked at her. If we'd waited even one more day, he would have done the same to you. Elena's hands shook. The Duke caught them gently. You were right to push. Right to expose them. Right to risk everything. His voice dropped. But you almost died tonight. And I… He stopped. Elena looked up at him, her heart hammering. You what? She whispered. The Duke's expression cracked. All the control, all the aristocratic ice falling away to reveal the man beneath. I realized I couldn't lose you, he said hoarsely. That somewhere in these past weeks you stopped being my consultant and became… He swallowed. Someone I can't imagine living without. Elena's breath caught. Your Grace. Adrian, he said. My name is Adrian, and I need you to use it. Elena stared at him. Then she smiled through her tears. Adrian. He kissed her. It was fierce and desperate and achingly gentle all at once. A kiss that tasted like grief and fury and something new, something neither of them had expected. Hope. When they finally broke apart, Elena was shaking. This is insane, she whispered. I'm nobody. You're a Duke. London will destroy us. Let them try, Adrian said. I've spent my whole life protecting my reputation, and tonight I learned it doesn't matter. He took her face in his hands. You matter. Truth matters. Everything else can burn. Elena kissed him again, and this time it felt like breathing, like coming home. But as they stood there in the starlight, neither of them saw the figure watching from the shadows. A woman in a dark cloak, her face hidden. She turned and disappeared into the London fog, and in her hand she carried a letter, sealed with Victor Hale's crest. The network wasn't finished. Not yet. The woman moved through London's pre-dawn streets like smoke, her dark cloak blending with the shadows between gas lamps. She carried Victor Hale's letter pressed against her chest, feeling its weight like a stone. 3 blocks from Pemberton Hall, she stopped at a nondescript townhouse, knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 times more. The door opened a crack. "The auction failed," she whispered. "Hale and Rathbone are arrested. The Whitford girl has photographs. Everything is exposed." A hand reached through the gap, taking the letter. "Tell the others," a voice said from the darkness. "Initiate the contingency." The door closed. The woman vanished into the fog. And in Ravencrest House, Elena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the distant sound of someone pounding on a door. She sat up, disoriented. She was still wearing the emerald gown from the night before, though someone had draped a blanket over her. Her head ached. Her throat was raw from shouting, and her lips still tingled from Adrian's kiss. The pounding came again, louder. She stumbled from the settee where she'd apparently fallen asleep and opened the door to find Adrian standing there, fully dressed, his face carved from stone. "Get dressed," he said without preamble. "We have a problem." 10 minutes later, Elena stood in Adrian's study, staring at the morning newspapers spread across his desk. Every single one carried the same headline, just worded differently. "Duke's Mistress Disrupts Prestigious Auction." "Ravencrest Romance Scandal. Art Consultant or Gold Digger. Forger's Daughter Makes Wild Accusations." Elena's hands shook as she picked up the London Times. The article was vicious, painting her as an unstable woman seeking attention and revenge, using her relationship with the Duke to gain access to society. It mentioned her father's disgrace, called her credentials questionable at best, and suggested the entire forgery investigation was a fabrication designed to destroy legitimate dealers. There was no mention of the photographs, no mention of Hale's confession, no mention of the truth. "They're burying it," she whispered. Adrian's jaw was tight. "They're trying to. Half these newspapers are owned by collectors who've been buying through Hale's network. They have millions of pounds invested in art that's now questionable. They can't afford for the scandal to be real. So they're making me the villain." "Yes." Adrian crossed to her, his expression fierce. "But it won't work. We have evidence. We have witnesses. We have Hale and Rathbone in custody." "For how long?" Elena met his eyes. "You said it yourself. The network is powerful, connected. How long before someone with influence gets them released? How long before the photographs disappear or get discredited?" "That won't happen." "Can't promise that." Adrian was silent because she was right. A knock at the door interrupted them. Adrian's butler entered, his face grave. "Your Grace, there are visitors. Lord Pemberton, Lord Ashworth, and the Earl of Wessex. They're demanding an audience." Adrian's expression hardened. "Show them in." 3 men entered, all past 60, all dressed in impeccable morning coats. Their faces were identical masks of cold fury. Lord Pemberton spoke first. "Your Grace, we've come to discuss the situation." "What situation?" Adrian asked, his tone dangerous. "The scandal you created last night," Pemberton said. "The wild accusations, the disruption of a legitimate auction, the arrest of respected professionals based on the testimony of—" He glanced at Elena with contempt. "A woman of questionable background." Elena forced herself to stay silent, her nails digging into her palms. Adrian stepped between them. "Miss Whitford is my personal consultant. Her credentials are impeccable, and her accusations are supported by documented evidence." "Evidence that hasn't been made public," Lord Ashworth said smoothly. "Evidence that, frankly, we have reason to doubt." "What reason?" "The photographer who supposedly took those images? He's disappeared. No one can locate him to verify their authenticity." Elena's blood went cold. The Earl of Wessex smiled thinly. "Without verification, those photographs are worthless. They could be staged, fabricated, the desperate attempt of a disgraced family to restore its reputation through any means necessary." "That's not true. Can you prove it?" Wessex cut her off. "Can you produce the photographer? Can you provide original negatives, chain of custody documentation?" Elena opened her mouth and closed it again. She had copies. Sophie had the portfolio, but the original negatives, the photographer's testimony, those were the foundation of their evidence. And now they were gone. "This is what we propose," Pemberton said, turning back to Adrian. "You release Mr. Hale and Mr. Rathbone immediately. You issue a public apology for the disruption last night, and you quietly dissolve your association with Miss Whitford." He paused. "In exchange, we'll forget this unpleasantness. No charges against you for false arrest. No social consequences. Your reputation remains intact." "And if I refuse?" The three men exchanged glances. "Then we will ensure," Pemberton said quietly, "that the Duke of Ravencrest becomes synonymous with scandal, instability, and poor judgment. We will make certain that every door in London closes to you. Your business interests will suffer, your political alliances will crumble, and your family name, the legacy your father built, will be destroyed." The silence that followed was absolute. Elena felt the world tilting beneath her feet. These men had the power to do exactly what they threatened. They controlled wealth, influence, access. They could dismantle Adrian's entire life with a few well-placed words. And it was her fault. She'd pushed too hard, too fast. She'd exposed the truth without considering the cost. "I'll withdraw," she said quietly. Adrian's head snapped toward her. "What?" "I'll leave London, issue a statement retracting my accusations, take full responsibility for the disruption." Elena's throat ached, but she forced the words out. "I won't let them destroy you because of me." "Miss Whitford." "She's being sensible," Pemberton said. "You should listen to her, Your Grace." Adrian turned back to the three men, and his expression made them step back. "Get out," he said softly. Pemberton blinked. "Your Grace, get out of my house, now." "You're making a mistake. I'm making a choice." Adrian's voice was ice. "Miss Whitford stays. The investigation continues. And if you attempt to interfere, I will personally ensure that every forgery in your collections is exposed, authenticated, and published in every newspaper in England." He stepped closer. "Try me." The three men stared at him, shock warring with fury. Then Lord Ashworth laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "You foolish boy," he said. "You have no idea what you've started. Victor Hale isn't the network. He's just one piece. And the moment you arrested him, you declared war on people far more powerful than you." "Then it's war." Ashworth shook his head. "You'll lose, and so will she." They left. The door closed behind them, and Elena felt her legs give out. She sank into a chair, her hands shaking. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "They'll destroy you." Adrian knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "Let them try." "Elena, I'm not giving up. Not on the investigation. Not on you. Not on any of it. But your reputation is worth nothing if I have to sacrifice the truth to keep it." His eyes held hers. "You taught me that. When you painted that portrait, when you exposed Hale, you showed me that some things matter more than safety." "Adrian? No." His grip tightened. "We finish this. Together. Whatever it takes." Elena stared at him. This Duke who'd chosen her over everything society demanded. This man who'd kissed her like she was worth burning for. And she made a decision. "Then we need to change tactics," she said. "They control the newspapers. They control the collectors. They control the narrative." She stood, pulling him up with her. "But they don't control everything. Not yet." "What are you thinking?" Elena's smile was sharp. "I'm thinking we stop playing by their rules. We stop trying to convince people who profit from lies, and we take the truth directly to the people who matter." "Who?" "Everyone else." "What's?" By noon, Elena and Sophie had transformed the East Gallery at Ravencrest House into an exhibition hall. They hung every questionable painting from Adrian's collection, 17 pieces, each with a detailed card explaining why it was suspect. Beside each forgery, they displayed Sophie's photographs of the corresponding piece from the Southwark warehouse. Side by side. Undeniable. Then they added context, documents showing the pattern of thefts across multiple collections. Testimony from Armitage about Hale's methods. Timeline showing how the network had operated for 20 years. And in the center of it all, Elena placed her portrait of Adrian, the painting that had started everything. The grief. The truth. The question that had exposed an empire of lies. It's not enough, Sophie said, surveying their work. The collectors won't come. And even if they do, they'll dismiss it as the ravings of a desperate woman. We're not inviting collectors, Elena said. We're inviting everyone else. She'd spent the morning writing invitations, not on expensive cream paper with gold seals, but on simple cards printed by the dozen. She'd hired street children to distribute them across London, to artists, journalists, students, tradespeople, anyone who'd ever felt powerless against the wealthy elite. Public exhibition, the truth about London's art world. See for yourself the evidence the powerful don't want you to see. Ravencrest House, open to all, no admission fee. Adrian found her in the gallery at 2 o'clock, staring at the invitations still stacked on a table. This is brilliant, he said quietly, and completely reckless. I learned from the best, Elena said. He laughed, a real laugh, the first she'd heard from him in days. When this is over, remind me to teach you subtlety. When this is over, remind me why I'd need it. He kissed her then, fierce and quick, and Elena felt something settle in her chest. Not peace, exactly, but certainty. They were doing this right. The doors opened at 3 o'clock. Elena expected a trickle, a few curious artists, maybe some journalists looking for gossip. What she got was a flood. They came in waves, painters who'd watched elite dealers control every opportunity, journalists tired of writing puff pieces for wealthy patrons, students who'd been taught that genius only belonged to the rich and dead. They moved through the gallery slowly, examining the forgeries, reading the documentation, studying the photographs. The silence was different from the auction. Not shock. Recognition. These people understood exploitation. They'd lived it. By 5 o'clock, the gallery was packed. People stood 3 deep in front of each painting, arguing, debating, pointing out details. Artists pulled out sketchbooks, documenting everything. Journalists took notes, their expressions sharp with interest. And word spread. By evening, the crowd had spilled into the street. Adrian's footmen gave up trying to control entry and simply opened all the doors, letting people flow through in a steady stream. Elena stood near her portrait, watching faces change as people recognized the Duke, then looked at the painting, then back again. That's not how they paint him, a young woman murmured to her companion. In all the official portraits, he looks proud, cold. But this, he looks human, her companion finished. Yes. Elena's throat tightened. A journalist approached her, a young man with ink-stained fingers and sharp eyes. Miss Whitford? I'm James Chen from the Workers' Chronicle. Small paper, but honest. Can I ask you some questions? Elena nodded. Why are you doing this? Chen asked. You had the Duke's protection. You could have stayed quiet, lived comfortably, let the scandal die. Why risk everything? Elena looked at her father's ring, still on her finger. Because my father died believing no one would ever clear his name. He died thinking the lies had won. She met Chen's eyes. I'm doing this so no one else has to die that way. So truth doesn't belong only to people who can afford it. Chen wrote quickly, then looked up. One more question. What do you say to people claiming you're doing this for attention? That you're using the Duke to gain status? Elena smiled bitterly. I say if I wanted status, I'd have stayed invisible. Status is safe. Truth is dangerous. She paused. Ask them which one I chose. Chen grinned. Perfect. Thank you, Miss Whitford. He melted back into the crowd. Adrian appeared at Elena's elbow. You're becoming a celebrity. I'm becoming a target. Same thing, in London. She laughed despite herself. But the laughter died when she saw who'd just entered the gallery. Lady Catherine Ashworth, daughter of the lord who'd threatened them that morning. She was young, perhaps 25, with elegant features and cold eyes. She wore a Worth gown that cost more than Elena would earn in 5 years, and she was staring at the forgeries with an expression Elena couldn't read. Your Grace, Lady Catherine said, approaching them. Miss Whitford, quite the spectacle you've created. We're simply presenting evidence, Adrian said coolly. Evidence that implicates my father's collection. Lady Catherine's smile was sharp. He's furious, you know, absolutely livid. He's already speaking to his solicitors about suing you for defamation. Elena's heart sank, but then Lady Catherine turned to look at the paintings again. The problem, she said quietly, is that you're right. Elena blinked. What? I've spent 15 years watching my father buy paintings he doesn't understand from dealers he barely vets. I've watched him spend fortunes on beauty he'll never appreciate. Lady Catherine's voice was flat, and I've suspected for years that at least half of it is fraudulent. She met Elena's eyes. I can't give you testimony. I can't testify against my own father. But I can tell you this. You're not alone. There are others, sons, daughters, younger collectors, who've watched this network operate and felt powerless to stop it. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded paper. This is a list. Names of people who've purchased through Hale's network. People who might be willing to have their collections examined if someone gave them permission to doubt. She pressed it into Elena's hand. Use it carefully. Then she turned and walked out. Elena stared at the paper, her hands shaking. She just gave us ammunition, Adrian said softly. She just gave us hope, Elena corrected. The exhibition ran for 3 days. Thousands of people came. The Workers' Chronicle published Chen's interview on the front page. Other small papers picked up the story. Artists' guilds issued statements supporting Elena's work. The tide was turning, not among the wealthy elite, but among everyone else. And that, Elena was beginning to realize, mattered more. On the 4th day, something extraordinary happened. A letter arrived from the Royal Academy of Arts. Elena opened it with shaking hands, Adrian reading over her shoulder. Miss Whitford, we have reviewed the evidence presented in your exhibition, including the photographic documentation and technical analysis. Your work demonstrates exceptional skill in the identification and authentication of period artworks. The Academy would like to formally invite you to present your findings at our next quarterly symposium. Additionally, we wish to offer you a position as consulting authenticator, advising the Academy on acquisitions and donations. This is the first such position offered to a woman in the Academy's history. We believe it is long overdue. Yours sincerely, Sir Edmund Hartley. President, Royal Academy of Arts. Elena read it 3 times, certain she was hallucinating. They're hiring you, Adrian said, his voice stunned. The Royal Academy is hiring you. They can't. I'm nobody. You're the woman who exposed the biggest art fraud in a century. Adrian pulled her into his arms, laughing. You're brilliant, you're fearless, and you've just changed everything. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. My father would have... She couldn't finish. Adrian held her tighter. He'd be proud, so proud. That evening, they received another visitor. The magistrate who'd arrested Hale and Rathbone appeared at Ravencrest House, his expression grave. Your Grace, Miss Whitford, I have news. Elena's stomach dropped. They've been released. No. The magistrate's smile was thin. They've been formally charged. Multiple counts of fraud, theft, conspiracy. The Crown prosecutor reviewed the evidence, including the photographs and the testimony from Mr. Armitage, and determined there's sufficient cause for trial. Elena couldn't breathe. When? 6 weeks, and it will be public. The magistrate paused. You should know 7 other dealers have been arrested in connection with the network, and 12 collectors have come forward requesting authentication reviews of their collections. 12? Adrian said sharply. The exhibition changed minds, Your Grace. People are starting to ask questions. The network is fracturing. The magistrate nodded respectfully. You've done something remarkable. Both of you. After he left, Elena and Adrian stood in silence. We did it, Elena whispered. We actually did it. You did it, Adrian corrected. You painted the truth when everyone else was hiding from it. You exposed lies people wanted to believe. You refused to stay silent even when silence was safer. He took her hands. You changed everything, Elena Whitford. Elena looked at him, this duke who'd risked everything to stand beside her. This man who'd chosen truth over safety, love over reputation. We changed everything, she said. Together. He kissed her, soft and sure, and Elena felt the weight she'd carried for 8 years finally begin to lift. Her father's name would be cleared. The network would fall. And she, invisible Elena Whitford, daughter of a disgraced forger, had become the woman who brought an empire to its knees. Kit. The next morning, Elena returned to the gallery one last time before the exhibition closed. She stood in front of her portrait of Adrian, studying the grief she'd captured, the truth she'd painted into the background. A figure appeared beside her, an elderly woman, simply dressed, with kind eyes. "It's beautiful," the woman said softly. "The way you painted him. Most artists show the mask, you showed the man." "Thank you," Elena said. The woman studied the portrait a moment longer. "My husband was an artist. He died 10 years ago, accused of forging a Caravaggio he'd been hired to restore. The scandal destroyed him." She paused. "His name was Thomas Merritt." Elena's breath caught. She knew that name. It was in Armitage's ledger, another scapegoat, another victim. "I'm sorry," Elena said quietly. "Don't be." The woman smiled, tears in her eyes. "Be proud, because what you've done, exposing these people, demanding justice, you've given my husband's memory back. You've proven he was innocent." She touched Elena's hand gently. "Thank you for not staying silent." She walked away, leaving Elena standing alone with tears streaming down her face. This was why it mattered, not for the wealthy collectors or the powerful dealers, for the Thomas Merritts, the William Whitfords, all the artists destroyed by lies they couldn't fight. Elena had given them their voices back, and she wasn't done yet, because the trial was coming, and when it did, the whole world would finally hear the truth. The trial was set for the first week of October, in the grand courtroom at the Old Bailey. 6 weeks felt like both an eternity and no time at all. Elena spent every day preparing, organizing evidence, reviewing testimony, working with the Crown prosecutor to build an unassailable case. But the network wasn't finished fighting. 3 weeks before the trial, Sophie's apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen except her copies of the photographs. The next week, 2 artists who'd agreed to testify received anonymous threats. One withdrew immediately, the other disappeared. And then, 5 days before the trial was set to begin, the Crown prosecutor summoned Elena and Adrian to his chambers. Sir William Bradford was a thin man with steel-gray hair and the weary eyes of someone who'd spent 40 years navigating London's legal system. He gestured for them to sit, then placed a document on his desk. "I've received a petition," he said without preamble, "signed by 17 members of Parliament, 8 lords, and the president of the Art Dealers Association. They're requesting that the charges against Victor Hale be reduced to minor infractions, misrepresentation, breach of contract, with fines but no prison time." Elena's blood went cold. "You can't be considering—" "I'm not," Bradford said sharply. "But I need you to understand what we're facing. These men have power, influence. They're threatening to tie this case up in appeals for years. They're suggesting that pursuing this prosecution will damage Britain's art trade, harm our international reputation, destroy legitimate businesses." "It's all lies," Elena said. "I know." Bradford's expression was grim. "But lies backed by power are dangerous, Miss Whitford. I can proceed with this trial. I can put Hale and Rathbone and the others on the stand, but I need you to be absolutely certain your evidence will hold." "It will," Adrian said firmly. "Even without the original photographer? Even with half your witnesses too frightened to testify?" Bradford leaned forward. "They will attack Miss Whitford's credibility. They'll bring up her father's conviction. They'll suggest she fabricated evidence out of revenge. They'll paint her as an obsessed woman with a personal vendetta." "Let them," Elena said. "The evidence speaks for itself." Bradford studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled faintly. "Very well, but I'm going to need something from you. Something undeniable. The photographs are good, but we need more. We need the forgeries themselves, original works that can be scientifically tested and compared." "We have them," Adrian said. 17 pieces from my collection alone, which you've already declared suspect. I need pieces from other collections, from the people who've been petitioning against this trial." Bradford tapped the document. "If we can prove that the lords defending Hale have forgeries in their own collections, that they knew or should have known, the case becomes irrefutable." Elena's mind raced. "They won't allow examination. They'll claim we're harassing them." "Not if they don't know it's happening," Bradford's eyes gleamed. "Miss Whitford, you've been offered a position at the Royal Academy. which gives you legitimate authority to consult on authentication matters. If certain collectors were to request your services discreetly through intermediaries, you could examine their collections without raising suspicion. You want me to infiltrate their houses. I want you to do your job, Bradford corrected. As a professional authenticator, what you discover in the course of that work is simply evidence. Elena looked at Adrian. He was watching her with concern and something else. Pride. It's dangerous, he said quietly. If they realize what you're doing, they won't, Elena said, because they don't think I'm smart enough to fool them. She turned back to Bradford. Tell me who we're targeting. Lady Catherine Ashworth's list proved invaluable. Over the next 4 days, Elena visited 6 estates, invited under various pretexts, authenticating new acquisitions, advising on insurance valuations, consulting on restoration projects. Adrian accompanied her to some, claiming concern for his investment advisor. To others, she went alone, playing the role of grateful supplicant finally being granted access to serious collections. And at each house, she found what she was looking for. Lord Pemberton's collection contained 3 forgeries, including a supposed Raphael sketch that showed modern pencil composition under magnification. Lord Ashworth owned a Vermeer with pigments that didn't exist until 1840. The Earl of Wessex had an entire gallery of Dutch masters, 5 of which Elena identified as works from the Southwark workshop. She documented everything, took discreet photographs with a small camera Sophie had acquired, made careful notes in technical language that would be devastating in court. And she did it all while smiling, nodding, accepting tea and compliments from men who'd threatened to destroy her. On the 3rd day at the Earl of Wessex's estate, something went wrong. Elena was examining a Rembrandt portrait when the Earl himself appeared in the gallery doorway. He was alone. His wife was at a garden party, the servants dismissed for the afternoon. Miss Whitford, he said softly. Find anything interesting? Elena's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. The Rembrandt is magnificent, my lord. The brushwork is exceptional. Is it genuine? The question hung in the air like a blade. Elena met his eyes. I would need to conduct further tests to be certain. But you suspect it's not. She said nothing. The Earl walked closer, his footsteps echoing on marble. I underestimated you, Miss Whitford. We all did. We thought you were a desperate woman seeking attention, but you're something far more dangerous. What's that? A true believer. His smile was cold. You actually think truth matters, that justice is possible, that you can dismantle a system that's existed for generations. I know I can, Elena said, because I already have. The Earl's expression hardened. You've won a few battles, made some noise, convinced some commoners to care, but you haven't won the war. He stepped closer. The trial begins in 2 days, and I promise you, Miss Whitford, by the time it's over, you'll wish you'd stayed silent. Elena's hands clenched, but she kept her voice calm. Is that a threat, my lord? It's a certainty. The Earl turned toward the door. Show yourself out, and don't come back. Elena left quickly, her heart pounding, her notes burning like coals in her bag. She'd gotten what she needed, but she'd also confirmed something she'd suspected. They were planning something, some final move to destroy her credibility before the trial even began. She just didn't know what. The answer came the next morning. Elena woke to find London's newspapers screaming a new scandal. Forger's daughter exposed. Miss Whitford's own work under question. Did Elena Whitford fabricate evidence in vendetta against respected dealers? The articles were coordinated, vicious, and detailed. They claimed that Elena's technical analyses were flawed, her conclusions unsupported by peer review, her methods questionable. They interviewed experts who suggested her photographs could have been staged. They insinuated that her relationship with the Duke had compromised her objectivity. And worst of all, they published a letter, supposedly from a fellow artist, claiming that Elena herself had once attempted to sell a forged painting, following in her father's footsteps. It was all lies, but it was printed in black and white across every major newspaper in London. Elena stood in Adrian's study, staring at the papers, feeling the world collapse around her. They've destroyed me, she whispered, before I even get to testify. Adrian was reading the articles with cold fury. These are coordinated, paid for. Someone orchestrated this. It doesn't matter who. What matters is everyone will believe it. Elena's hands shook. Everything I've built, the exhibition, the academy position, the credibility, it's all gone. When I take the stand, they'll tear me apart. Not if we prove it's false. How? Elena turned to face him. The letter is anonymous. The experts are hiding behind pseudonyms. Even if we prove some of it's fabricated, the doubt will remain. And doubt is all they need. Adrian crossed to her, taking her shoulders. Elena, listen to me. You are the most brilliant authenticator I've ever met. Your work is meticulous. Your evidence is solid. Nothing in these papers changes that. It changes everything, Elena said bitterly. Because now when I point out forgeries in their collections, they'll say I'm lying out of spite. When I present evidence, they'll say I fabricated it. I've become exactly what they wanted, a vengeful woman with no credibility. She pulled away from him, her eyes burning. Maybe I should withdraw. Let Bradford proceed without me. The evidence can stand on its own. No. Adrian's voice was fierce. That's what they want. For you to disappear, to be silenced again. To let men with power decide what truth looks like. But if my testimony hurts the case, your testimony is the case, Adrian interrupted. You're the one who saw the forgeries. You're the one who connected the network. You're the one who had the courage to expose them. Without you, there is no trial. Elena stared at him, torn between fear and fury. Then Sophie burst through the door, newspaper in hand, face flushed with anger. Have you seen this garbage? She demanded. These lies about you attempting to sell forgeries? I know every painting you've ever sold, Elena. Every single one was documented, authenticated, legitimate. This is complete fabrication. Can you prove it? Elena asked quietly. Sophie faltered. I can testify. They'll say you're biased. My friend defending me out of loyalty. Elena sank into a chair. Don't you see? They've thought of everything. Sophie looked at Adrian helplessly. Then a new voice spoke from the doorway. Not quite everything. They turned. Lady Catherine Ashworth stood there, still in her traveling coat, her face set with determination. Lady Catherine, Adrian said, surprised. How did you? Your butler let me in. I told him it was urgent. She crossed to the desk, pulling papers from her bag. These articles. I know who wrote them, or rather, who paid for them. She spread the papers on the desk. My father hosted a dinner 3 nights ago. He was drinking, boasting to his friends about how they'd finally found a way to destroy that Whitford girl. Her jaw tightened. He's funding the campaign, him and 6 others. They've paid journalists, bribed editors, fabricated evidence. Can you testify to that? Elena asked, her heart pounding. No, I have no proof except what I overheard, and my father would deny everything. Lady Catherine met her eyes. But I know someone who does have proof. She pulled out a final paper. The artist who supposedly wrote that letter about you. He doesn't exist. The name is fabricated, but the signature on the payment voucher for the article is real. She pointed. Thomas Armitage. Elena's breath caught. Armitage. The dealer who'd turned witness against Hale. The man who'd given them the ledgers. Who was apparently still working for the network. He played both sides, Adrian said, his voice dangerous. Gave us information to seem cooperative while still protecting his real allies. More than that, Lady Catherine said. He's been feeding them information about your case, telling them what evidence you have, which witnesses are vulnerable, how to attack your credibility. She paused. He's the reason your photographer disappeared, the reason your witnesses received threats. Elena felt rage surge through her like fire. Where is he? That's the problem. No one knows. He disappeared 2 days ago, probably fled the country. Then we have nothing, Elena said. Just more accusations we can't prove. Actually, a new voice said from the doorway, you have me. They all turned. The man standing there was slight, perhaps 60, with nervous eyes and ink-stained fingers. He looked like someone who'd spent his life being invisible. My name is William Fletcher, he said quietly. I'm a clerk at Armitage's gallery. I've worked there for 20 years, and I'm here to testify against him. Chet, Fletcher had brought everything. Ledgers showing payments to journalists, correspondence between Armitage and the collectors funding the smear campaign, documentation of threats sent to witnesses, even a draft of the forged letter about Elena's supposed fraud, written in Armitage's own hand. "Why are you doing this?" Elena asked, staring at the evidence spread across Adrian's desk. Fletcher met her eyes. "Because I'm tired of being invisible. Tired of watching powerful men destroy innocent people while clerks like me stay silent to keep our positions." He paused. "Your father was a good man, Miss Whitford. I met him once, years ago. He was kind to me when others weren't, and I watched them destroy him with lies." His voice hardened. "I won't watch them do it to you." Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. "Thank you." Fletcher nodded. "There's one more thing you should know. Armitage didn't flee the country. He's hiding in London, at a townhouse in Bloomsbury. He wrote down an address. The collectors are planning to smuggle him out after the trial, once he's no longer useful." Adrian was already moving toward the door. "Then we get him now, before he disappears." "Wait," Elena said. "If we arrest him directly, they'll claim we're harassing witnesses, intimidating people to support our case." "Then what do you suggest?" Elena smiled grimly. "We let him come to us, at the trial, where he can't run and they can't protect him." The trial began on a cold October morning under gray skies that threatened rain. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, artists, collectors, members of parliament, and ordinary Londoners who'd waited hours for a seat. The public gallery was standing room only. People pressed shoulder to shoulder to witness what many were calling the trial of the century. Victor Hale sat at the defendant's table flanked by 3 expensive lawyers. He looked calm, almost bored, dressed in an immaculate suit. James Rathbone sat beside him, pale but composed. 4 other defendants, dealers and workshop forgers, filled out the row. Elena sat in the witness gallery, Adrian beside her, Sophie on her other side. Her hands were shaking despite the ring on her finger, despite Fletcher's evidence, despite everything they'd prepared, because she knew what was coming. Sir William Bradford stood to give his opening statement. His voice was clear and precise, laying out the charges: conspiracy to defraud, theft, forgery, obstruction of justice. He promised to prove that the defendants had operated a criminal network for 20 years, destroying lives and stealing millions of pounds. Then Hale's lawyer stood for rebuttal. Marcus Aldridge was considered the best defense attorney in England, expensive, ruthless, and utterly without conscience. He smiled at the jury like a kindly uncle. "Gentlemen," he said warmly, "the Crown would have you believe that my clients are criminals, master forgers running a vast conspiracy. But the truth is far simpler and far sadder." He gestured toward Elena. "This case rests entirely on the testimony of one woman, Miss Elena Whitford, a woman with an admitted grudge against the art-dealing community, a woman whose father was convicted of forgery, a woman who, by her own admission, has been conducting a personal vendetta for years." Elena's jaw tightened. Aldridge continued, "The Crown will show you photographs, documents, testimonies, but all of it traces back to Miss Whitford's interpretations, her analyses, her conclusions." He paused. "And as recent investigations have revealed, Miss Whitford herself has questionable ethics. She has attempted to sell fraudulent works. She has fabricated evidence. She has manipulated a powerful duke into supporting her campaign." "Objection," Bradford called. "Counsel is making claims not in evidence." "I'll rephrase," Aldridge said smoothly. "We will demonstrate that Miss Whitford's testimony is unreliable, her methods are flawed, and her conclusions are driven by personal bias rather than professional expertise." He turned to the jury. "Don't let a vengeful woman destroy innocent men. Demand real evidence, demand real proof, and when you see that neither exists, I trust you'll deliver the only verdict that justice allows: not guilty." He sat down. The judge called the first witness, and the battle began. Bradford built his case methodically. He called technical experts who confirmed Elena's analyses of the pigments and techniques. He presented the photographs, entered them as evidence, explained their provenance. He called Fletcher, who testified about the ledgers and Armitage's role. But Aldridge was relentless. He attacked every witness, questioned every piece of evidence, suggested alternative explanations for everything. The pigments could be anomalies. The photographs could be staged. Fletcher could be lying to protect himself. And through it all, he kept returning to Elena. Her father's conviction, her lack of formal credentials, her inappropriate relationship with the Duke. By the third day, Elena could feel the jury wavering. They needed something undeniable. That afternoon, Bradford called Elena to the stand. She walked to the witness box on shaking legs, her hand on her father's ring for courage. She swore the oath and sat down, facing the courtroom. Bradford approached gently. "Miss Whitford, please tell the jury how you first became aware of forgeries in London's art market." Elena took a breath and began. She told them about her father's conviction, about the years of disgrace, about standing in the Duke's gallery and seeing the altered landscape, about recognizing the pattern of thefts and replacements. Her voice was steady, her testimony clear. Bradford walked her through the evidence, the forgeries she'd identified, the technical analyses she'd conducted, the connections she'd discovered. Then he asked the question Elena had been waiting for. "Miss Whitford, the defense has suggested that your conclusions are driven by personal bias, by a desire to avenge your father. How do you respond?" Elena looked directly at the jury. "My father taught me to see the truth in paintings, to look past what people claim a work is and see what it actually is. That skill has nothing to do with bias. It's about observation, analysis, evidence." She paused. "But yes, this is personal, because when you watch someone you love die in disgrace for crimes they didn't commit, truth stops being abstract. It becomes survival." She leaned forward. "The network that destroyed my father is the same network on trial here. They profit from lies. They destroy anyone who threatens to expose them, and they rely on people like me staying silent out of fear." Her voice hardened. "I refuse to be silent, not for my father's memory, not for the other artists they've destroyed, and not for the people who deserve to know the truth about what they're buying." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Then Aldridge stood for cross-examination. He smiled at her like a shark. "Miss Whitford, you claim to be an expert authenticator, but you have no formal degree, no professional certification, no peer-reviewed publications. Isn't that correct?" "I have 18 years of practical experience. Please answer yes or no." Or Elena's jaw tightened. "Yes. And your primary qualification is that you are the daughter of a convicted forger. Isn't that correct?" "My father was wrongly convicted. Yes or no, Miss Whitford?" "Yes." Aldridge paced. "You've testified that you identified forgeries in multiple collections, but these identifications are based solely on your personal observations. No independent verification, no scientific testing beyond what you conducted yourself. Correct?" "The scientific tests speak for themselves, conducted by you, interpreted by you, conclusions drawn by you." Aldridge turned to the jury. "We have only your word that these tests were conducted properly, that the results are accurate, that your interpretations are valid." Elena felt her composure cracking. "The evidence is documented." "By you," Aldridge repeated. "Tell me, Miss Whitford, how much is the Duke of Ravencrest paying you for your services?" "That's not relevant." "How much?" Bradford objected. "Your Honor, this is a harassment." "I'll allow it," the judge said. "Answer the question, Miss Whitford." Elena took a breath. "The Duke paid me £500 for the portrait. He's providing room and board during the investigation, and the Royal Academy has offered me a salaried position. So you've profited significantly from these accusations." "I've been compensated for my work that conveniently targets the Duke's rivals and critics." Aldridge's voice sharpened. "Isn't it true that every collection you've declared fraudulent belongs to someone who's opposed the Duke's political interests?" "That's a lie." "Is it?" "Let's see. Lord Pemberton voted against the Duke's trade bill. Lord Ashworth testified against him in a property dispute. The Earl of Wessex blocked his appointment to the Arts Committee." Aldridge counted on his fingers. "Quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say?" "The forgeries have nothing to do with politics, or everything to do with it." Aldridge leaned on the witness box. "Tell me about the letter, Miss Whitford. The one claiming you attempted to sell a forged painting yourself." Elena's heart pounded. "That letter is fabricated. A lie created by Thomas Armitage to discredit me. Thomas Armitage, the man who testified for the Crown, the man whose evidence supports your case. Aldridge smiled. Convenient that he's now accused of fabricating evidence against you. Makes his testimony against my clients rather suspect, doesn't it? He worked for both sides, or he's telling the truth about one side and lying about the other. The question is which? Aldridge stepped back. Miss Whitford, you've built your entire case on speculation, personal interpretation, and the testimony of a man you now claim is a liar. You have no credentials, no peer verification, and a massive financial incentive to support the Duke's vendetta against his enemies. He turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this witness is unreliable, biased, and motivated by profit. Her testimony should be disregarded entirely. He sat down. Elena sat there, shaking, feeling everything collapse around her. Then Bradford stood. Redirect, Your Honor. Miss Whitford, do you have anything to add? Elena looked at the jury, at the faces watching her with doubt and skepticism, and she made a decision. Yes, she said clearly. I'd like to present new evidence. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Order, Miss Whitford, this is highly irregular. Your Honor, Bradford said quickly, the defense has raised questions about Miss Whitford's credibility and the authenticity of evidence. We have documentation that directly addresses these concerns. The judge frowned. This should have been disclosed during discovery. We only obtained it 2 days ago, Your Honor, from a witness who was in hiding. Bradford looked at Elena. With the court's permission, we'd like to present it now. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Proceed. But briefly. Elena stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Thomas Armitage to the stand. The courtroom exploded again. Aldridge shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Mr. Armitage is not on the witness list because he was in hiding, Bradford said, fleeing potential charges as a co-conspirator. But he's been located and is now cooperating with the Crown. I object in the strongest possible. The judge held up a hand. Where is Mr. Armitage? Bradford nodded to the bailiff, who opened the rear door. 2 constables led Thomas Armitage into the courtroom in handcuffs. He looked broken, his clothes rumpled, his face unshaven, his eyes hollow. He saw Elena and flinched. The bailiff swore him in, and he sat down heavily. Bradford approached. Mr. Armitage, please state your occupation. I'm an art dealer. His voice was barely audible. Or I was. And you've testified previously in this trial, is that correct? Yes. I provided information about Victor Hale's network. But that testimony was incomplete, wasn't it? Armitage swallowed. Yes. Please explain. Armitage looked at Hale, at the lawyers, at the packed courtroom. Then his shoulders slumped in defeat. I gave the Crown partial information, enough to seem cooperative, but I continued working for Hale, feeding him information about the investigation, helping him undermine Miss Whitford's credibility. His voice cracked. I wrote the letter claiming she'd sold forgeries. I paid journalists to run articles attacking her. I arranged for witnesses to disappear. The courtroom was utterly silent. Bradford continued quietly. Why are you testifying now? Because I'm tired of running, tired of lying. Armitage looked at Elena, his eyes filled with tears. And because I owe a debt to William Whitford. Elena's breath caught. I knew your father, Armitage said directly to her. We were friends once, before I let greed corrupt me. When Hale needed a scapegoat, I helped frame him. I planted the forged Rembrandt. I testified against him, and I watched him die knowing the truth would die with him. His voice broke. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can never make it right, but I can at least tell the truth now. He turned back to Bradford. Everything Miss Whitford has testified to is accurate. Every forgery she's identified is real. The network exists exactly as she described, and the men sitting at that table, he pointed at Hale and the other defendants. They're guilty of everything they've been charged with, and more. Bradford let the words settle. Then he said quietly, The Crown rests. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Elena spent the time in a small room off the courthouse, unable to sit still, unable to eat, unable to think about anything except Armitage's testimony and whether it would be enough. Adrian held her hand. Sophie paced. Fletcher sat quietly in the corner, his presence a reminder that sometimes courage came from unexpected places. Finally, the bailiff appeared. "They're coming back." The courtroom filled quickly. Elena took her seat, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must hear it. The jury filed in. Their faces were solemn, unreadable. The judge entered. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor. In the matter of the Crown versus Victor Hale, on the charge of conspiracy to defraud, how do you find?" "Guilty." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, but the foreman continued. "Guilty on all counts, for all defendants." Elena felt the world tilt. Adrian's arm came around her shoulders, steadying her. Sophie was crying. People in the gallery were cheering. The judge called for order, but his own expression showed grim satisfaction. "Mr. Hale, Mr. Rathbone, and co-defendants, you have been found guilty of operating a criminal conspiracy that has defrauded honest citizens, destroyed reputations, and corrupted London's art market for 2 decades. The court will reconvene tomorrow for sentencing. Until then, you are remanded to custody." The bailiffs moved forward. Hale stood slowly, his face a mask of fury. His eyes found Elena across the courtroom. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "The network is bigger than me. You've won nothing." "I've won the truth," Elena said. "That's everything." Hale smiled coldly. "We'll see." Then the bailiffs led him away. The sentencing came the next day. Victor Hale, 20 years hard labor. James Rathbone, 15 years. The other defendants received sentences ranging from 5 to 12 years. Thomas Armitage, in exchange for his cooperation, received 3 years and was banned from the art trade for life. But the real reckoning came after the trial. Elena's technical analyses were published in the Royal Academy's journal. Her methods were peer-reviewed and validated by experts from across Europe. The Academy not only confirmed her position, but created an entire department of authentication with Elena as its director. The collection sheet identified as containing forgeries were examined by independent experts. 43 additional forgeries were discovered and removed from circulation. Several prominent collectors quietly withdrew from public life, their reputations in tatters. And the Crown issued a formal pardon for William Whitford, declaring him innocent of all charges, his reputation fully restored. The day the pardon was announced, Elena stood at her father's grave with Adrian beside her. "I did it, Papa," she whispered, touching the headstone. "I cleared your name. I proved you were right. I proved you were good." She placed flowers on the grave, the same wildflowers he'd loved to paint. "I wish you could see what I've become, the work I'm doing, the people I'm helping." Her voice cracked. "I wish you could meet Adrian. You'd like him. He sees the truth in things, just like you did." Adrian's hand found hers. "He'd be so proud of you," he said softly. "Not just for clearing his name, for everything you are." Elena looked at him, this man who'd stood beside her through scandal and danger and the complete restructuring of her entire life. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Yes, you could have," Adrian said. "You're the bravest person I've ever met, Elena Whitford. You always have been." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Elena's breath caught. "I know this is complicated," Adrian said. "I know marrying me means becoming a duchess, dealing with society, facing all the scrutiny and pressure that comes with my title." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band set with a single diamond. "But I don't want to face any of that without you. I don't want to live a life where you're not the first person I see every morning and the last person I talk to every night." He took her hand. "Marry me, Elena. Not because you need my protection or my name, but because we're better together than we ever were alone." Elena looked at the ring, then at the man offering it. A year ago, she'd been invisible, powerless, carrying grief she couldn't fight. Now she was the director of the Royal Academy's authentication department, the woman who'd brought down the most powerful forgery network in England, someone with a voice that people listened to. But more than any of that, she was someone who'd found a partner who saw her, really saw her, and loved what he found. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, and they stood there together in the cemetery, beginning something new beside the grave of something lost. 6 months later, on a spring morning bright with possibility, Elena stood in the Ravencrest private gallery, the same room where she'd first seen the altered landscape. The painting hung before her, fully restored now. Her team of conservators had spent months carefully removing the overpaint, revealing the original composition beneath. And there he stood. The Duke's father, painted by a master's hand, standing near the bridge in the Flemish landscape. His face was kind and dignified, his posture relaxed, his eyes fixed on some distant horizon, exactly as he'd been before someone tried to erase him. "It's perfect," Adrian said, appearing beside her. He wore his wedding coat still. They'd been married that morning in a small ceremony with just Sophie, a few Academy colleagues, and the artists Elena had helped along the way. "It's complete," Elena corrected, "the way it was always meant to be." Adrian studied the painting, and she saw peace settle into his expression, the grief he'd carried for years finally finding resolution. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for seeing what was missing, for refusing to let it stay hidden." "That's what I do," Elena said. "I see the truth in things." "And paint it," Adrian added. "Don't forget that part." Elena smiled, because she hadn't forgotten. In the East Gallery, the room where she'd held the exhibition that changed everything, a new portrait hung in the place of honor. Not Adrian this time. Herself. She'd painted it over the winter months, working in the same careful details she'd used for his portrait. But this time she hadn't hidden anything. No shadows, no restraint. She'd painted herself exactly as she was. A woman in a simple dress with paint-stained fingers and sharp gray eyes that saw too much. Behind her, instead of a landscape, she'd painted the Ravencrest gallery, filled with the forgeries she'd exposed and the truths she'd revealed. And in the corner of the canvas, almost invisible, she'd included her father's portrait. Still watching, still present, still proud. The painting was titled simply, "The Woman Who Saw." It had been on display for 3 months now, and every week young artists came to see it, women and men from backgrounds like hers, people who'd been told they couldn't succeed, that truth didn't matter, that power always won. They stood in front of her portrait and saw something different. They saw proof that one person, armed with nothing but truth and courage, could change everything. Elena had given them what her father had given her, permission to see clearly and speak honestly, no matter what it cost. That was her legacy now. Not just the forgeries she'd exposed or the network she'd destroyed, but the voice she'd given to everyone who'd ever been told to stay silent. "Come on," Adrian said, taking her hand. "We have a wedding breakfast to attend. Sophie will kill us if we're late." Elena laughed and let him pull her toward the door. But before she left, she turned back to look at the restored landscape one more time. The Duke's father stood in his proper place, painted back into existence, his memory honored, truth restored, justice served. And Elena Whitford, no, Elena Vale now, smiled. Because she'd learned something powerful over these past months. The world could try to erase you. It could paint over your truth, hide your voice, make you invisible. But if you were brave enough to look closely, patient enough to uncover what was hidden, and fierce enough to demand that others see what you saw, you could paint yourself back into existence. You could make them look. You could make them see. And you could change everything. Elena turned and walked toward her new life, carrying her father's legacy and her own courage forward into whatever came next. The woman who saw too much had finally seen enough, and the world would never be quite the same.